Good afternoon. My name is Kayla Peters, and I'm the Outreach and Event Coordinator here at the Kensington Falls Church. On behalf of the Kensington, we thank you for sharing your time with us this afternoon. The Kensington Falls Church is an assisted living and memory care residence located in the heart of Falls Church, Virginia. Our enhanced programs enable us to deliver care beyond what the traditional senior living community can deliver. We are open for in-person and virtual tours by appointment. Please visit our website. We look forward to listening to your needs. Now, let us review a few housekeeping rules for this afternoon. We are using Zoom webinar format, so your videos and microphones will be off. There will be slides shown during the presentation, so please know you can split the screen by clicking the View button and choosing the split screen option if you'd like. We did collect a number of questions from our registrants prior to the event, but if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A feature to submit them, which we will read to our speaker at the end. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. We are fortunate to be hearing from our Memory Care Director and PAC Certified Trainer, Tonya Embly. Tonya has been with the Kensington Falls Church since we opened our doors 4 years ago. Tonya oversees our Connections neighborhood, which offers early to mid-stage memory care, as well as our Haven neighborhood for residents in need of mid to late stage memory care. Tonya is trained in Teepa Snow's Positive Approach to Care, or better known as PAC. As a PAC certified trainer, Tonya has shared her knowledge and insights with each team member throughout all departments of our building. Today, we are excited to share Tonya's approach to care with you. We hope that today's glimpse into the positive approach to care will help you join the journey of dementia care and learn a little bit on how to have enjoyable conversations with your loved one experiencing dementia. Please join me in welcoming Tonya Embly.
Hello. How's everyone doing? Welcome back to our second series in the journey of dementia care, a glimpse into positive physical approach. I'd like to start off with doing a recap from our last webinar. Those who have was with me last time, it'll be a recap. Those of you who weren't with me last time, I want to tell you the positive approach to care, the steps in order to make it to where you approach somebody. Okay, so first off, you want to make sure you do a visual. The first thing you need to do when you approach somebody with memory care is to provide them a visual. Then you provide them a verbal. Only after you've done these two things will you do sensory motor. Remember last time we talked about if you start with the sensory motor, that could scare somebody, cause them to trigger, maybe anger, maybe they'll be scared. So you never provide sensory motor, which is feeling, until you've provided the visual and then the verbal. And then the last two parts of the positive approach to care would be smell and taste. The most important is provide visual, verbal, and then sensory motor, and then smell and taste comes into play as well. So with that being said, I want to go over the approach that we use in starting to provide care for our residents is you have to get into you have to provide the approach with them before you can even do communication. So I want to go over the tunnel vision. A lot of people do not recognize that people with dementia actually start to lose how much they can see. So if you can bear with me and do this with me, as we get older, can see things about this far to our sides. That's why you start seeing elderly people who are tripping over their own feet, having falls that are unnecessary. But somebody with dementia, what I want you to do is I want you to put the scuba mask on. Put a scuba mask on and look straight ahead. And then take your scuba mask off. Look at how much you can see with the scuba mask and how much you can see with the scuba mask off. Somebody in the early to middle stages of dementia are actually seeing with a scuba mask. So you can understand why when you approach somebody, you have to provide the visual, the verbal, and then the touch. Middle to late stage dementia, do this with me, put on your binoculars. I don't know if you've ever looked through a binocular before, but this is what somebody in the middle to late stages is seeing. Take your binoculars away and think about how much you're seeing versus somebody who's in the middle to late stages. So the way you approach somebody in order to communicate with them, it's very important. So we do a breakdown of somebody who is living with dementia. In a public space, you're more than 6 feet away. They have visual awareness and they can do social interaction. No problem there. But then if you're 6 feet to arm's length away, you're in a friendly conversation and you're in a friendly manner and you're having a physical conversation. Before you can go into the intimate space, you have to be invited into that intimate space. If someone doesn't invite you into their intimate space, you might be triggering them. So before you can start a conversation, you have to see if they're willing to let you go into their intimate space. So one way that we do with Teepa Snow is if somebody wants us to get into their intimate space, is we put our hand up like this. Remember last time I told you don't wave, because when you're trying to get somebody's attention from across the room, you would wave to them. What we want to do is we want to get the visual part in. So then someone's looking at you with the visual part. Then what you want to do is you want to extend your hand. If somebody doesn't take your hand to invite you into their personal space, you need to stay, into their intimate space, you need to stay in their personal space, because that's an indication they don't want you in their intimate space. Can you still carry on a conversation with somebody that's in the intimate, the personal space? Yes, you can. One of the things that I want to tell you is if you can only get to the personal space, you want to make sure that you're not using a confrontational stance. Because remember, according to what they see, they can't see around you. So if you're standing right in front of somebody, then basically you've blocked everything else that they can see, and they might become angry. So what you want to do is once you get into the personal space or the intimate space, you want to throw your shoulder off to the side like this. They can still see you and they can see right past you. So they're not feeling like you're trying to charge at them. So you want to make sure that when you want to have that communication with them, that you're either in their personal space or their intimate space. And then you want to throw your shoulder out. That way they can see everything that's going on around them and you're not actually blocking their view. That's very important, because somebody who feels like they're being attacked, it could be because you're right in their face and you want to make sure you shift that shoulder. So when you're in the public space, you want to get their attention. In the personal space, you want to reach your hand out and see if they take it. It's ingrained in their brains from the time that they're young that when somebody puts their hand out to them, then they automatically will either shake your hand or ignore you. If they shake your hand, then you can go into the intimate space. Once you're in the intimate space, if they're willing to shake your hand, we use what's called a hand under hand. The hand under hand approach is you want to go in, and instead of just shaking their hands, you want to get into a posture that's more like this. The reason for that is somebody with dementia, the first things they lose, put your 3 fingers up. The first thing they lose is their sensory motor. That's these 3 fingers. These 2 fingers are their strength fingers. I can tell you that I have shaken some people's hands without going into the hand under hand approach, and I can't get my hand back because they still have their strength fingers. And so they're going to hold on to you and you're not going to be able to get your hand back. So in our next webinar, I'm going to go over more of the approach on how to get into that butterfly effect and how to actually do the hand under hand for many of the cares that you're going to provide. So we're going to get into more into the care aspect in our next webinar. Once you enter the personal zone, if you're able to enter that personal zone, then you're going to get into the supportive stance. And then that's when you're going to be able to give information. That's when the communication is going to start. So once you start the communication, you can use three things. You can use visual cues, you can use verbal cues, or you can use tactile cues. Visual cues is actually showing them something to start the conversation. Say you have albums of old pictures. You want to show them to them, and then you can start a conversation that way. Verbal cues, I'll tell you that many of our residents, the first thing a person with dementia loses is their nouns. So sometimes it can be difficult to understand what it is that they need. How can you communicate with them? So with the verbal cues, you might want to also show them. Like we have one gentleman on the 4th floor who he always asks for orange juice, but we know him so well because we've been working with him for so long that we know he doesn't want orange juice, he wants milk. And so when he first started losing the ability to tell us exactly what he wanted, we came up with cards that had a picture of milk, a picture of orange juice, a picture of water, and a picture of coffee. And then we would show him the cards and let him point to what it was that he wanted. That way, we didn't frustrate him in our communication, and he was able to communicate to us exactly what he wanted. The verbal cues are very handy during care. You want to give verbal cues, and you only want to give one verbal cue at a time. If you say, I want you to do this, this, and this, well, you've done lost them. So when you're actually providing care to somebody, you want to do one thing at a time, or even just talking with them. Don't talk to them with several agendas. You want to talk with one thing at a time. So like if I'm helping somebody get dressed, I'm going to tell them we need to take your pajama bottoms off. That's it. When that is completed, then I can go on to the next task. But if you give somebody with dementia too many tasks, just like we talked about in the last session, you can only hold 5 to 8 items on your brain at a time. And that peaks at the age of 25. So I don't know about you, but I'm 55. And I'm pretty sure, and my boss would probably tell you, my brain can only hold 4 to 5 items without writing it down, if that. So imagine somebody with dementia. They're not holding 5 to 8 items in their brain. They can only take one task at a time to complete that task. So to have a good conversation with somebody, you want to take one thing at a time before you move on to the next thing. Tactile cues. And we'll get in more into this in our next webinar as well. Tactile cues is actually touch. If you are trying to brush somebody's teeth, you want to give them the visual, show them the toothbrush. You want to give them the verbal, we're going to brush our teeth. And then you want to do the tactile, where either you help them brush their teeth or you are actually going to mimic brushing your teeth and show them how to do it. Several of my care managers actually have their own toothbrush that they keep in their pocket. The reason for that being, it's easier for them to do the tactile cues by them actually putting the toothbrush into their mouth and actually doing all the motions so that the person living with dementia actually mimics what they're doing. I was really happy when I started seeing some of my care managers carrying their own toothbrush because, number one, their breath's not going to stink because they're brushing their teeth as well. And number two, they're doing something good for the residents. So I really like that approach. So when you're doing your visual cues for communication, communicating with your loved one, you don't want to use triggers. And after you have been around a loved one or someone you're caring for, you'll know what their triggers are. Say you have somebody who lived during the wartime. Some of their triggers could be the news. You don't want to talk about the news with them. If you know somebody doesn't like something in particular, you want to stick to the things that you know your loved one likes. We have some ladies who like gardening. I can have great conversations with them when it comes to gardening. But if I shifted the gear, they may not be into whatever it was that I'm talking about next. You can also use the verbal cues of what would you like to do? Now, you might get, I don't know, because people with dementia can't actually start a task. So in the early stages, they might be able to tell you, what they might like to do. But as they progress in their dementia, you have to realize that they can't start their own tasks. So what you may need to do is you may need to go around your house and you may need to say, let's put this puzzle together. Don't ask them if they want to put the puzzle together, because 9 chances out of 10, they're going to tell you, I don't want to put the puzzle together. But if you say, come with me, we're going to put this puzzle together, then chances are they're probably going to follow you and they're just going to start doing it. For somebody in late stages dementia, sensory items are very important. They like the feel of the touch. We have several balls in connections which are hairy. They have spikes in them, not spikes that'll hurt them. They're just soft, spiky balls. But just the touch, fabric swatches are great for them to get that touch. These are all ways of communicating with someone living with dementia. And remember, the first thing they lose are nouns. So they cannot, you're going to feel like this. If you're trying to talk to somebody who has dementia and you're trying to get to what they want to say, you're going to be going, whoo, 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 and you're going to go all around the circle until you finally figure out what it is that they want. So you want to give them the opportunity to tell you. So if you say something to somebody who's living with dementia, don't automatically finish the sentence for them. That could frustrate them. If after a few minutes they still haven't been able to respond, what you can say is, would you like me to help you with that word? And then once they say yes, then you can finish it for them. Living with dementia is frustrating, especially in the early to middle stages, because they know what they want to say, but the word is just not there. Several things to use for communication, like I said, memory albums. We here at the Kensington, we use MemPick books. MemPick books are great. It's done through the BCAT, and it's stories with colorful pictures. And so you can sit down with somebody with these colorful pictures. If they can't read, you can read it to them, and then you can kind of point out things that are in the pictures. If they can read, let them read it to you. Whether or not they're comprehending it, you can then use the pictures to help them comprehend it. MemPick books are sold through, Dr. Mansbach created them, and you can find them on the web if you look up BCAT, and it's just a simple little book. I wish I had brought an example with me today. I can bring that to my next webinar, but it's just books focusing on, one book may focus on baking. And then with the baking, you can actually, do an activity that goes along with that baking. So if you're looking at this baking book and they're talking about cooking pies, then you can follow through with actually working with somebody with dementia in order to bake a pie. That's communication, because you're doing something together. The person doesn't need to be talking for you to be communicating with them. We have one of the 50s. Most of them recognize Elvis Presley. So, when they see Elvis Presley, they actually recognize him. And some of the other people, I can't think of them because, I wasn't around in the 50s, but they have several stars that are actually in the book. And some of my residents can actually say, oh, that's Eva Gabor, or that's, whoever else lived in the 50s. They're really fun to sit down with. And it's a way for you to be able to communicate to each other. And you're either letting them read or you're explaining it to them using the pictures. Oh, look at that beautiful horse. What does a horse say? How do they communicate? So that's a good way to actually communicate with your loved ones, is actually sharing these MemPicks. We love them here at the Kensington. I know in memory care, we use them all the time. And we try to encourage our families, hey, why don't you buy a MemPick book off of the website? They usually run about $14.99, I believe. And then if, COVID was awful, and at least during COVID, some of our families actually purchase the books and they can sit on the other side of a Zoom call and they can look at the book while someone's sitting next to their loved ones looking at the book, and they can actually share, oh, do you see that picture of the flower, Mom? And then the person sitting next to them can actually point to the flower, which is really great. Another thing in communicating is a lot of people don't want to lie to their loved ones. I don't want to say that we're lying to them, because sometimes lies are different than fiblets. If you know something's going to hurt your loved one, if you tell them, don't tell them. You know, they don't need to know that you're going to a concert tonight, because that's when we start to see behaviors, because you've told them you're going to a concert and they don't understand why they can't go to the concert too. So when you're communicating with your loved one, think about, is this going to hurt them? If it's going to hurt them, then let's just not tell them at all. Because like I tell all of my care managers, none of us have actually lived with dementia and survived it. So we can only surmise what they're thinking, what they're feeling. You have to actually just go with their feelings. If you weren't included in that concert, how would you feel? Would that hurt your heart? Would that make you angry? Would that be a trigger for you? And then, you know, just take and tell them, I need to go to the grocery store real quick and pick up a few things, but then go enjoy the concert. Don't feel guilty, because you have to live your life as well. One of the biggest things that I tell most of my families is don't feel guilty, because at least when they're here at the Kensington, they're having more fun than you're having. So, you know, don't feel guilty about going on with your life, because I can tell you, I've seen the activities that happen here, and I see the magic that happens. And I know that if they were at home, they'd probably just be sitting in a lean back chair and watching TV. They're not watching TV all day. They are being stimulated. And that's what a neurologist will tell you. A neurologist will tell you that somebody living with dementia needs stimulation, they need family, and they need exercise. Family comes in either through visits or through Zoom calls or a phone call. The exercise is just simple things like sitting in a chair and doing arm, leg exercises. We might be walking throughout the neighborhood, walking around the block. So we're providing all of that. So if you're living with your loved one at home, you know, make sure that they're getting those three things. Make sure they're being stimulated. Make sure that they're being, you know, family is near them, and make sure that they're getting some exercise. It's not going to stop dementia, but it's going to help to possibly give them a good quality of life. With that being said, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything that I wanted to go over with you. In our next session, what we're going to be doing is we're going to actually get into the hand under hand, and I'm hoping to have a video for you next time, to where you can actually see me going into hand under hand with one of my coworkers, or even if a family member approves me using them, go into hand under hand. The reason for hand under hand during communication is once you've gotten into their personal space, it's a comfort to them. They can actually comfort the loved one. And I will tell you, you'll learn next time also that just pumping the palm of the hand, that's a comfort type thing. So if you're holding their hand with the hand under hand, you can actually pump. If your loved one with dementia is actually turned this way and you want them to look this way, pumping their hand, it's automatically going to make them turn towards where the pumping of the hand is happening. You also, part of hand under hand is to visually direct or look at. So the pumping of the hand will help them to look at, or the way we're going to teach you is how you're going to be a rudder for your loved one. And also hand under hand can get someone started. Sometimes we use hand under hand to get our residents started in eating. Once they've started, my mother used to tell me when I was a young one that every time my elbow moved, something was going into my mouth. That hasn't stopped to this day, unfortunately. I wish I could forget that one. But sometimes just showing them hand under hand eating process, that gets them started, and then they just continue on, because then it becomes a motion. It can also help with detail and assist. So a lot of people living with dementia do eventually use their small motor. Remember, these 3 fingers are small motor. So you can use hand under hand to help them feel like they're still in control, and you can do it with them. So when you're in the hand under hand motion, you're actually helping them to unzip their pants. You're actually helping them to put on a shirt. And we'll get more into that in our next webinar. To move or change direction, it goes back to, again, I'm going to show you how to be the rudder. And so like when you're going out on walks, going in supermarkets, if you're using hand under hand and you're actually the rudder, they're going to turn in the direction that you're turning. And this is also helpful when you're toileting somebody. A lot of people get their loved ones in front of a toilet and they automatically want to push them back so they sit down. Hand under hand can help you to be able to bend when they bend, and they're going to follow you using the hand under hand. We'll get more in detail in our next webinar about that, but I hope this helped you in starting a conversation. Make sure that you are inviting yourself into their personal space. Once you're into their personal space, then you can start the conversations. Start the conversations with simple things, and don't bring up things that you know will be a trigger to them. I wish I could see all of you, and I know exactly what you're going through as caregivers, and I wish I could just give you all a hug and tell you, you know, we're all in this together. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Tonya. All right, so now we're going to go into answering a few questions. So we did receive a few questions from some registrants prior to the event. So here I'll start off with our first question. Tips for safely taking a senior with dementia outdoors for a walk without increasing anxiety, confusion, and/or possibly frustration.
Okay, so number one, you want to know how much stimulation your loved one has. So if a lot of noises are going to scare them, you don't want to take them out on a busy street and try and walk with them. If you know a park that's nearby, if you could drive them to that park and actually get them out and have them walk around the park, that's great. In our next webinar, we're also going to go over how you can use hand under hand to be the rudder for that person living with dementia. So where if you're using your hand under hand, then you'll be able to steer them in the direction that they're going. And for those who just want to get their loved one out, who might be in late stages of dementia, and they've actually reached a point to where they just aren't responding to visual, verbal, or tactile cues, then you might want to just take them out in a wheelchair just to let them get the fresh air, because even though they need the exercise, sometimes we don't want to put them in an unsafe condition.
Right. Great. And that's perfect, because that actually goes right into my next question, which you kind of already answered. Any advice on those who do not want to go out, so who are refusing, as you just said?
So with that, bringing back to what I mentioned in this session was you don't want to ask them if they want to go for a walk. I can tell you, I can go ask any of my residents, do you want to do this? They're most likely going to say no. So I've even taught PT how to do this. Don't ask them or tell them we're going to go do PT. Say, follow me. Chances are they're going to follow you and they're going to do what it is that you're doing. But if you ask them, and I will tell you, you're not going to win a fight with anybody with dementia. Who needs to change? We do. And we need to change the approach, and we need to change the way we're saying it, because people with dementia, like someone who is stubborn. And so you just have to go into their reality and, you know, just have them follow you. And if they don't follow you, then they really mean they don't want to do it, and try a different time. Come back 10 minutes later and try again.
Mm-hmm. Right. Great. And another question I do have is, how would you navigate a move for someone who has dementia?
Okay, repeat that. I'm sorry.
Did you not hear me? How do you navigate a move for someone with dementia?
Are we talking about a move into assisted living, a move into memory care, or a move just from house to house?
I would go with maybe from house to maybe assisted living or memory care into a new environment.
So we've done this in several different ways, and it depends on the person. If they're in early to middle stages, they're not quite going to be in agreement to it, because they still have enough of their memory left that, you know, they know the house they're living in belonged to grandma. So if you're trying to transition them, the best thing to do is to talk to the place where you're taking them. They can actually give you some advice. I know when we were trying to move somebody from assisted living to memory care, they were adamant about not moving up there. You know, we have to use that fiblet. Well, we have a lot of work. There's a pipe that busted in your room and we have to move you upstairs. So once they're there and they're having fun, they transition. Sometimes we have to say, I had a family who moved in who said they're going on vacation and they need somebody to take care of her. And so we went with that pretense. And when the daughter visited again, she didn't want to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. So it also depends on where you're moving them, because you have to make it worth their while, and you have to put them in a place where you know they're going to get the stimulation, they're going to meet others who are like them. And then it's up to the staff, and it's up to me as the director of memory care and my supervisor, Kai Frank. It's up to us to make sure that they're being involved in all activities. We need to, you know, spend some extra time with them in the first few days to actually get them adjusted. And once the transition period is over, it is like the best feeling in the world. I mean, there's nothing better than to see somebody living with dementia who is extremely happy. And that makes my heart just pound.
Right. That's great. That's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today. As Tonya did say, we will be having our last and final part of the series, which will be happening, I believe, on June 18th. And that will go over more of the physical challenges that you'd be dealing with a loved one who has dementia. So we want to thank you so much, Tonya, for your time.
Well, and just keep in mind that you have my number that Kayla had up at the beginning. Even after the webinars are over, if you need help, you know, my heart is in this, and I want anybody that needs help and needs some advice, please call me, because, you know, I'm available, and whether it's work related or just a friendship related, I'm open to calls.
Right. And that's so great of you. And we will be having this recording. If you do want to go back and watch it again, as well as the first part, in case you missed it, will be up on our website under on our Connect page. So you can find the recordings on that page there as well. I will also put up the holding slide for the last few minutes, just if anybody wanted to jot down your information, your contact information. But again, thank you so much, as always, Tonya.
You're welcome. Bye-bye, everyone.